So, dear students of Ukrainian-American Concordia University, so I'm happy to present you now the sales contract, and I will discuss usually with you, but in that case, I will go through the whole sales contract and make my suggestions, and you can follow these, and perhaps you have different ideas, but I will try to explain why I'm doing these suggestions. So therefore, I'll go to the sales contract, and what I told you was the task that you have only to read with a common sense, because I think you will find the critical points also only by reading with a common sense. So the sales contract has been signed and concluded between a German machinery company on the one hand as an exporter, and on the other hand by a Chinese company as an importer. There are some references on the top as contract number, date of signature, and so on. And please be aware that is a sales contract really executed and not any fake or only written for this lecture. I took it because I think it is a very good example what one can make better in a sales contract. So you see here, first of all, the contract is made and entered into through friendly negotiation. Yeah, sure. And then the two parties are named here. The company International Co. Limited. So I made it anonymously because I'm not allowed to talk about the real companies. And on the other hand, I have the seller, the company in Germany. The company in Germany is called the seller. So then we can really start with Article 1. In Article 1 are named goods, specification, quantity, and the unit price. So you see here in that table, it's an inspection system, specifications X, Y, 0500. It's one set at a unit price of 69,950. And if you remember my part of the lecture concerning Incoterms, you see here, Incoterms are firstly named here CIF, cost, insurance, freight. That's included here, and so the total price is the same, 69,950. Once again, total value, CIF, Shanghai Seaport. That means that's a port of unloading. And you see here an additional point, including 6-day training and installation. Okay, so far. Country of origin, manufacturers, Germany. That's also very clear. Then going to Article 3. Once again named contract price. You have seen it in Article 1, but here exactly named. 3.1, the total contract price amounts to 69,950. And now, please be aware, what is the written amount? Is that the same? Which is the amount which is now the amount agreed on? And if you have to decide which one, the amount in figures or in words, the written one, then usually the written one is the relevant. Now, it seems to that it is not the case here, but that's the first difficulty. And contract price, as you have seen, CIF, Shanghai Seaport, in the People's Republic of China. But that is a mistake. So really a mistake, not only interpretation, which is better or so, it's a real mistake. Going down to terms of payment. And I try to give you a first impression what our terms of payment are. You can pay in advance, you can pay after delivery, or some, let's say, in between, because in the case you're paying in advance, the importer takes the whole risk, and paying after delivery, then the exporter has the whole risk, and you want to divide it between these two. So the total contract price shall be paid by the buyer to the seller. So that's really the case between, so from the Chinese company to the German company by means, and that's now the case here, irrevocable letter of credit. That is the tool. That is where the bank promises to pay if all things are fulfilled by the seller or exporter. I will tell you a little bit more in detail how these letters of credit are handled. Here you can only presume that it means a bank promises to pay after seller has fulfilled his obligation. Additionally, the buyer shall 30 days prior to the date of shipment open this letter of credit. So that means the Chinese company has to go to the bank and asking, will you promise instead of me? And that's what the bank has to decide. Here in that case, the bank has done. So the bank promises to pay. And then the payment, or here it's named the credit, but it's nothing else than the payment, will be available after presentation of following things. A draft, that's like a bill of exchange, drawn at sight on the opening bank. The amount is 90% of the contract value. And then some other documents have to be delivered also. And these are named then in the following. Payment shall be effected by the opening bank, that means by the bank of the importer, the Chinese company, against presentation of the foresaid drafts and the documents. And the documents are now following here in A, B, C, D, E, F, and so on. So you see here the draft and a full set of bill of lading. That is a transportation document. I hope you know these. Otherwise, let me know and I can explain. Then in B, 2 originals and 2 copies of ocean transportation insurance. So remember, CIF are the Incoterm, and I means you have to bear the insurance. And that's a very, or mostly, or in every case, nearly every case, chosen amount, 110% of the contract value. So 110% of, in our case, around about 70,000 euros. And also you have to name the risks here against your insured. And that is named here, all risks and war risks. C, you have to present 5 originals, 2 copies of manually signed commercial invoice. Yes, for sure, indicating the amount to be paid. Then 2 originals, 3 copies of detailed packing list, indicating the shipping weight, number and date of corresponding invoice. E, original 3 copies of X Works quality certificate issued by the manufacturer, and 1 original 2 copies of certificate of origin issued also by the manufacturer. Is there any critical point here in these documents? What is, for example, a detailed packing list? What does it mean, exactly mean? So might be at the end that there is an interpretation, and then it is up to the one who has to decide. Might be a court, a judge, or whatever. Then we're going to G, 1 copy of fax to the buyer advising the shipment within 48 hours after it is made. And H, 1 copy of declaration of no wood packing material issued by the seller, or 1 original certificate issued by the beneficiary, certifying that the wood packing material have been treated and marked WPM and in compliance with IPPC standard ISBPM 15. One of these critical, the fax, for example. How will you prove that you have sent the fax as the exporter? What is a case if you not able to send the fax and you have no protocol therefore? Proven that you have sent because the other party has shut down the fax, or it is not in function, or whatever. Can you prove that you have sent the fax? And the copy of declaration is H, of no wood packing material issued by the seller, and you have to make out a certificate. Therefore, you have to know for sure the rules or the IPPC standards. Yeah? So I would for sure look for G in that case. And for example, also sending an email or whatever. But it is perhaps not possible to fulfill, or you should delete it. Then balance 10% of the contract, you remember, against the documents are only 90% payable. Now the rest of 10% against additional documents or other documents. Certificate of acceptance test signed by the representatives of the end user and the seller, and then 3 originals of manually signed commercial invoice. Is that a critical point here? A, yes, it is a critical point, because if the end user will not establish the certificate of acceptance test, not because they have not done a positive test, but perhaps while they don't want to, because of any reason, then you will not receive as the exporter the 10%. So you're depending on the end user and of his will to establish this test certificate. Then seller shall, if the seller fails to submit payment documents in due time, all the costs thus incurred at the port of unloading, including but not limited to storage expenses and overdue fine, shall be borne by the seller. So if he can't fulfill, will not fulfill, or he is not able to fulfill, then additional costs are all and not limited to the seller. And that had been, for example, the case in times of COVID, that you were not able to send documents by courier service to a bank, in that case I have in mind, to India. But might be the same with China. And then the problem is you have not sent the documents, you've not presented the documents, and then you will have the problem of additional cost or fine or storage expenses, whatever. So you can't avoid perhaps every risk, but only to show you there is a certain risk. 4.3, in case the seller is liable for paying liquidated damage or a compensation under the contract, the buyer, Chinese company, has the right to deduct it from any payment which is due. So also that is an additional risk for the seller. And 4.4, all banking charges incurred by the buyer's bank shall be borne by the buyer, while those incurred outside the buyer's bank shall be borne by the seller. That means usually sharing the banking charges, and I can really say that's very often used. Each party has to bear, let's say, their own banking charges. So I will stop here. I hope you have a first impression how you have to read such a sales contract, and where might be a risk for one of the parties. Here in my case, I would more focus on the risk of the German exporter. So many thanks for listening, and hope that you gain some, let's say, knowledge. Thank you again, and in case of questions, do not hesitate to contact me.